Hello, my name is Kayla Adams, and this is the Older Adult Oral Presentation for Social Work Class 501. For this project and presentation, I decided to interview a family friend of mine. Just a little bit of background about her. She is a 65-year-old retired account representative from an Intermountain Healthcare company. She has two children and grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. She had a rich, varied experience to share with me. With a lot of experiences, a lot of interesting things happened to her. So I think she was a great subject for the purpose of this assignment. Throughout the course of our discussions and our talking, I found that a lot of the things that she related to later in her life, after adolescence and her young adulthood, and in older adulthood, was steeped in things that she had experienced when she was in her adolescence. And this was a number of things that kept coming up that was just affected by things that had happened in her adolescence. And because of that fact, I decided to focus this assignment on that stage of her life because I think it still has such a profound effect on her and many people when it comes to what we're going through. I decided to focus more on her adolescence. So here goes. This developmental stage that I use for my subject, adolescence, this is really a time marked by exploring who we are and developing our sense of identity. We're trying new roles. We're looking at the roles we've been playing. We're looking at other people's roles and kind of deciding on what makes the most sense to us. And I feel like this is very, very inherent in kind of how we view outside forces. So we see this a lot when it comes to like moving away from seeing our parents as a viable role model to moving to seeing maybe other role models like celebrities or heroes or something like that. So this really is a time when we're exploring who we are, what we want to do, and what we want to integrate into our identity as we move forward. And this was a time that a lot of things came up for her when it came to who am I and her identity. Some of the experiences that she had that really marked her experience in adolescence and stayed with her throughout her life was one that at that age, she started to sexually mature very quickly. So adolescence goes from about 10 years old to about 18 to 22. And she actually started her menstruation at 10 years old, which especially at that time, we are seeing people start younger and younger, but at that time when she was growing up in the 50s and 60s, this was really an early maturation. So she developed breasts, she grew taller, and this really led to people treating her differently. And this is one of the things that she experienced that she kind of took with her. Another thing that she started to experience in this adolescent stage was she really began to question religion in her family and what was surrounding her. Growing up in Salt Lake City, Utah, it is very, very prevalently Mormon or LDS as they call themselves. And this religion right now, these days, it's about 65%. So back then, 50 years ago, 55 years ago, there was a lot higher population of Mormons. So she was really saturated with this. And she was feeling some conflicts when it came to what it was teaching her and really wanting to move away from the faith. So these were two things that characterized her adolescence and that she was kind of dealing with when it came to her identity and moving forward. The challenges she experienced during these two periods with her early puberty were being treated differently. She was a tomboy. She really liked to play sports and play with the boys and run and jump. And when she started developing breasts and started her period, she started getting inappropriate touches and name calling from the boys that she used to hang out with. Obviously, they were confused as to what was happening, and she was confused. And a lot of adults, a lot of people that she looked up to, started saying, "Hey, you need to stop acting like a boy," and that she needs to kind of act, how a woman should act. And this came with a lot of fear, that she was changing in a way that she didn't want to. She didn't want to move away from the things that she wanted to do. And this is one of the challenges that she really faced. Another challenge was religious questioning that she was going through. She really had to find her own answers in a state, community, and a family that was really only ascribed to one religion. So finding her own answers in terms of what does she believe, especially when it comes to faith and religion, was really difficult for her. So dealing with the pressures of being that one rare person who was questioning the status quo and the religion in that way was a huge challenge for her at this age. Because of these two things, she went through a big psychosocial crisis, right? I mean, in her head, she was going through a lot, and this was definitely changed and altered by how people socially were treating her. So she was really trying to understand herself as a sexual being, while also not letting it define her or change her. So she was having a hard time observing that in her body. In the article, Invited Commentary about why body image is important to adolescent development, this really centers on why body image plays a significant role in how we develop our identity and how we see ourselves and how we want to be seen, and where the limits of our sexual selves are to our social selves. And she was really dealing with this as she went through adolescence and puberty at the same time. So this was a huge crisis for her. The other psychosocial crisis she was dealing with was pretty evident in questions she had about the religion, and how she really honestly didn't want to absorb that as part of her identity. She got to a point in her adolescence that I think she was to the point where she did not want to be Mormon. And she did not want to kind of live by the standards that set. So this was a crisis because everybody she knew, everybody she loved and interacted with was pretty Mormon. So this was a hard crisis internally, and affected socially. Because of her very religious family and the time of her upbringing, something that added to this crisis was the fact that her mother really never told her what was coming. Her mother didn't tell her what a period was. Her mother did not tell her what she could expect when it came to her body changing, how to take care of herself when her body changed. So this really added to the pressures of maturing so early in adolescence. We can only imagine going through this with no information and trying to figure out how to deal and what to do and how not to be so hardly affected by this. So this definitely added to that crisis she was feeling when it came to her sexuality and her puberty. Also, because of the deep religious culture that was surrounding her, the crisis got even worse, because she really did not want to lose that community and the connections that it was steeped in. Her older brother had left the church before, so he was able to kind of walk through with her, but really it was really difficult because the amount of community that surrounds the church, it's really just based and steeped in, we are a community and this is how we connect to one another. So taking away that religious piece, she felt, could also take away her sense of community and her connection to the people around her. So what she didn't want to do was, deal with that. But this definitely added to the crisis, made things worse, and took away from what she was experiencing. There are a couple of things that changed, kind of made things worse, you could say, when it came to dealing with these crises. So sexism, which is stereotyping and generalizing about women and men and treating them in particular ways based on these stereotypes, probably played a big part in how people treated her as she sexually matured. She was constantly being told by people that she looked up to that now that she was a woman, and that she was starting to go through this, she needed to stop doing things that she loved to do. She needed to stop acting like boys act, and they generalized her and told her this is how women are supposed to act. So sexism played a vital role in adding to the crisis of, okay, I'm changing, and that means that everybody expects me to change the things that I love as well and how I act. So definitely heaped on some more onto this psychosocial crisis, and didn't help a lot. But ageism also played a role when it came to her leaving the church. Ageism is having negative attitudes towards either aging or younger. Both people can come up against ageism, but having negative attitudes toward people that are aging or younger based on the belief that they should function in a certain way or they can't do certain things. That's like the stereotype of old people shouldn't drive, right? And that is definitely considered ageism. So at such a young age, she started questioning the church between ages 12 and 15, which is pretty young to be really questioning your entire basis for what you were raised on. So I'm sure that she had a lot of people who were older than her telling her, you're too young to make this decision. You're too young to know what you want, too young to know what's right, too young to make this decision. So ageism definitely played a big part in this crisis for her when it came to questioning the church and or leaving the church when she was ready. To get through these crises and kind of use strengths and get through this with a resolution, she really relied heavily on her siblings for help. When it came to understanding her body and what was happening, she was able to talk to her older sister. Since her older sister had gone through puberty, kind of figured things out. Apparently her mother didn't tell her older sister how to deal with this either. So her older sister definitely had to feel it out and do it for herself. But her sister was able to kind of be a strength here and tell her what she can expect. And you can see that reflected in my subject's later life. She discusses her sister at length, talks about how close they became as siblings, especially because you have to really rely on the siblings so much, and they really helped you through a really, really tough time. That really created a bond between the two of them. So she even said if her sister hadn't passed away 5 years ago, she'd really like to discuss, what this point in time was like for both of them, what it was like going through this alone without an older sister of her own to tell her what was happening to her body since her parents weren't saying anything. So this really comes through as she got older and developed that relationship and used her as a strength. You see a similar relationship happen with her brother. He played a large role in supporting her decision to look away from the religion because he had left the church on his own. He could tell her and show her it's possible to leave the church and still be connected to your family, still be connected to your community, and still have that support. So definitely another strength that she used when deciding, do I move away from the church? Is it worth it? Can I remove this from my identity? And he was integral in showing her, yes, this is possible. And yes, you'll probably be happier because this is what's right for you. So I would also like to look at this through Pinier's theory of cognitive development. So this theory centers on the fact that this is the time, adolescence, when we start to use hypothetical deductive thinking and logic. So we start to be able to really critically think, put things together, review different information and put them into one place and come up with, a theory and test that. And I think this is pretty evident in her moving away from religion. She started thinking logically about what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and evidence and all of that. So I think for her, seeing the big picture, it really didn't meet the reasoning standards that her mind, her cognitive ability was reaching. And so she used this to kind of think around religion and get away from it. Also, her ability to accommodate her schema to understanding new information about her body was huge. The ability to kind of absorb this new knowledge, take it into what she thought she knew, and alter that schema was huge. So Pinier's theory of cognitive development really played a huge part in her understanding how to treat her body now that it had changed and being able to alter her perception of what she should be doing, as well as thinking about where she wants to be, what she wants to do when it comes to religion.